Okay, so I think we are live now. So, guys, just before starting, so are you able to hear my voice? Is my voice audible? So, if you're able to hear me clearly as well as see me, guys, please ping on the chat. So, okay, great, guys. So, I think I am audible. So, hi everyone, and welcome to this session. So, I hope everyone is doing very well. So, during this festive time period, and so today, what we will basically be doing is we'll start with basically making Node.js application, right, and React application as well. So, you can say we will be building full stack application today, right? So we basically will be using APIs, and we will be building APIs in Node.js, and then we will be moving on to the React application, wherein we will be using those APIs which we built using Node.js, and we will utilize those APIs, right? Okay. So, guys, just a few details before starting. So, what we will be doing is we'll be starting off by learning what authentication is, what is authorization, and how these things basically interact with backend as well as front end, right? And then we will basically also give you the GitHub URL, which I will be working on, right? So I will be pushing each and every change onto my GitHub repo, and I'll give you that change, that repo basically, so that you can also follow, right? So, so this is a boot camp for basically learning authentication and authorization with Node and React, right? So how to couple these two things together and how to use these, right? And we'll also be basically learning about APIs a little bit, right? Okay, cool. So let me just quickly start with Node. So we will be first of all we will be making our backend, right? And backend we will be using Node.js for that. And I hope you have some familiarity with Node. If not, then also it's fine because we will basically. I'll just be teaching each and everything which I'll be writing, right? So I'll teach in each and every code. So don't worry about that. I will be talking about that also. And I think it's time and let's get started, guys. And also, by the way, we also have TS. So if you have any questions or anything, like if you're stuck anywhere throughout the code, so just type your question on the chat and we will answer your questions. Um, we have TS. So we will do that. Okay, guys. So let's quickly start. Let me just share the screen and we can quickly start the application so we won't waste a lot of time. So let me just share the screen. Hmm. Okay, guys, so I hope everyone is able to see my screen. So guys, if you are able to see my screen, so please just ping a yes or a no uh, on the chat so that I can continue. Hmm. Okay, good evening, Monish. So guys, this will be a 2-hour webinar basically, and 2-hour session, right? So first of all, guys, whoever has basically not signed up for career camp, please do that, right? So whatever we will be doing in this session is basically just a glimpse of what we will learn in a career camp, right? So career camp is basically a 9 months program where we teach you from the starting, from the basics of data structures, and then we go on to learning web and then React also, and then we get you place, right? So this is just a basic glimpse of what you will and you can learn in the career camp, right? So if you have not already registered, so please do register, guys. So first of all, let's just start with what is authentication and how authentication takes place in today's world, right? So we'll be discussing about that first. So let's just start with our diagrams. Right. So this is, I think, this should be good. So learning by diagrams, learning by doing, that would be really good, right? Okay, guys. So I hope you guys know that in today's world, we have basically two types of applications, web applications that we can create. One is the multi-page application, and one is the single-page application, right? The multi-page application is basically an application where you have multiple pages, right? As the name suggests, you have multiple pages. But in a single page application, you only have one single page, right? So what's the difference between the two? So for single page application, what happens is you only have one page, which is index.html, right? So you might have worked with different websites, right? With different apps, or you might have created some application, right? So index.html is the pretty common and the very basic page, right? Index.html, which is the main page, right? So in single page application, you only have index.html, and everything rest of the pages and everything, routing and everything, is basically done through JavaScript, right? That is single page application. We won't get into much depth into these topics, but yeah. And the multi-page application is basically meaning that they have different multiple pages, first of all, and those pages are basically served by the server, right? So what happens is, for example, if you go to home, so you make a request to the server will give you the home page, right? Then you want to go to, let's say, contact us page, then you just hit the URL, and again the request will go to the server, and the server will basically give you the contact us page, right? So you have different pages in a multi-page application. But nowadays we have only, and not only, but a lot of businesses and organizations use single page applications, since it is much more efficient, because I mean uh, single page applications are technically using JavaScript, right? So they are basically running and doing all of this stuff in client, right, in client side, using JavaScript. So these are single page applications, and almost everyone uses these kind of applications, like Facebook, Myntra, Flipkart. Almost every application, most of these applications which you use right now are actually single page applications. Right. So here what we will be doing is we will be making single page application only, and we won't be making multi-page application. That basically means we will be using React to create a single page app, which will be a very, very, very basic app, just to demonstrate how login and how authentication and everything works in React with Node, right? And our backend will be Node.js, and we have to basically create APIs, right? So how does a backend reacts with the not reacts, but how it interacts with our client, right? So our client is React, we have Node as backend, right? So how do these two things interact with each other? These two things interact with each other via an API, right? So we will be creating APIs, and using those APIs, this interaction between client and server will happen, and we will do both of these things, right? So let's quickly get started. So let me just first tell you what is the authentication process in case of single page application, right? So if you are familiar with multi-page application authentication system, that you might know that they use a session, but in a single page application we do not use sessions. So that's an altogether different topic. We won't discuss about that over here. But yeah, so let's just get started how authentication happens in a single page application, right? So let me just quickly draw some objects over here, and I'll name them also. So we have this server, right? So let's say this is a server, right? This thing over here, and we have our client. Uh, let's change the color. So this is our client over here, right? So this will be our client. So we'll see how these two will interact with each other, right? So first we'll talk about authentication, right? What is authentication? So basically nowadays, for each and every website, or most of the websites, you have a user base, you have a user system, right? Wherein what you want to do is, for example, let's take the example of Flipkart, where you uh, show, I mean, relevant items, right, to the particular user, right? For user one, items showing in the recently viewed list or suggested items in the for that particular person will be different for a user two, right? So that's why we basically create a user base so that we can give personalized information for that particular user for our website, right? So Flipkart does that, Facebook also has that. So for Facebook you have different users, and each user has different friends and things like that, right? So we have users almost in every website, right? So how does that happens, right? So why do we actually create users? So again, we want to store data for that particular user, right? That's why we basically have to create a database of users, wherein different users will have different details, right? And things like that. So how do you identify that on Flipkart, for example, user one is coming or user two is coming? Which user is coming on Flipkart, right? How would you identify that? Right, so we all know that the identification is basically done on basis of either email or username, right? So you have a unique email or a username based on different websites, right? So for example, in Facebook you can have your email as well, you can use your I mean username as well, you can use your phone number as well. So these three things are basically unique for each and every user, right? So you basically, based on your email, let's just take an example of email for now, and let's just forget about other unique things. So we'll be taking email only. So for example, if we take email, so you will be identified by your email, right? So what happens is basically when you basically go to the website, you go to the Facebook's website or a Flipkart website, let's say that, right? So what happens is that you want to first identify yourself, and how you do that? You use your email ID, right? And you basically use your password as well, email and password, to identify yourself that hey, I am user one and I will be using your services, right? And once the user logs in, then basically uh, you show the user, um, if we take the example of Flipkart, you show the user his wish list or her wish list, right? And his or her personalized suggestions, right? So that's why we basically you use an authentication system, right? A user base, ideally. So we have different kind of mechanisms. So here what we will be doing is we will be using email password authentication only, and we'll be focusing on that only, right? So what happens is, now considering a single page application system, so let's see how it happens. This is our server, right? And this is our client, right? So generally what happens, a user will basically come on your client website, and he or she will find a form over there, which will be a login form, right? So what happens is you will enter your email and password. Then what will happen, after you enter, you basically just hit a request for login, right? You will hit a request for login to the server. That request will go to the server, and what server will do is server will check that hey, is this email address part of our user base, right? User database. So is this email address part of our user database? If it is, so let's just discuss the scenario if it isn't, right? So if it isn't, what server will do is server will basically return an error, right? So whatever error is, like let's say password is not matching with email, or whatever, this user does not exist, or whatever errors there can be, this server will basically return that to the client, right? Whatever errors is there will be, and then client will basically show those errors to the user, right? And now let's discuss the scenario where your email address and password is basically perfectly fine, the combination is perfectly fine, and a user exists in the database, right? So guys, just remember these steps which I'm talking about. So while we are coding, we will follow these steps only, and we will use these steps to make our logic, right? So definitely it will be recalled when we are coding, right? But now what will happen is, if the combination matches and everything is matched, what happens is you get a unique token, so which is basically called a JSON web token, right? So you get that token, and we'll discuss about that in depth in a little while. But what do you get is you get a unique token, so that token server will send that token to you, right, over here to the client side. And what client side does is client side will basically store that token somewhere, either in local storage or cookies or wherever, right? This is a case of success, so it will give you a unique token. And why is that? Because guys, again, what is happening over here is this is a single page application, right? So in a single page application we will not reload our page, right? So for example, if I am on home, I want to go to contact us, or let's say some other page, which is let's say user profile page, right? So if I want to go to a user profile page, then obviously server does not know that you are logged in or not, right? Server will not know that. So what the process will be, you log in over here in the client side, you give your email address and password, the server will give back a token, right? And now you want to go to user profile page, but the server will not know that you are authenticated or not, that you are who you are claiming to be, right? You are claiming to be user one, so are you literally user one or you are someone else, right? So server does not know that. So using this unique token, what you would do is, when you want to go to user profile, right, when you want to fetch the user profile data, so you would send this token to the server as well, right? So next scenario, what will happen, let me just copy, this is just general scenario, login scenario, right? So let me just write that also, login scenario. So now what will happen is, now you are logged in and you are want to go to user profile page, right? So let me just copy it and paste it over here. Let me just increase the size also. Yeah, this is a user profile page. So now what you will do is, when you want to fetch the user data, fetch, let's write it over here, fetch user data. So now when you want to fetch user data, you would send this token to the server. You would send this token to the server, right? And then server, what the server will do is, server will basically just use this token, decode this token, and see that is this the same user which the user is claiming to be, right? So if user one is basically accessing his or her profile information, so using this token, server will first find out that, hey, is this the user, is this user one is correct or not, right, using this token. And when the user is successfully verified by the server will return the response, right? Return the user data to the client. This is basically how authentication happens, right? So here, this is the authentication part which I talked about at the very first diagram, and this is this authorization part. Authorization, by what do you mean by authorization? Authorization is basically, I mean, if you are doing an action, if you're performing an action, are do you have permissions to do that or not? That is called authorization, right? So are you authorized to get this user data or not, right? So we use that authorization using this token, which the user gets while logging in, right? So there's a difference between authentication and authorization. And I'll just quickly go through once again. So let's take this scenario. Our client side, we have a login form, and we basically have a login form. We submit email and password. The request is made to the server. Server will just verify if this user and email password and email password combination is correct or not. If it is, it will return you a token, a unique token, which we'll talk about later on, right? That is called authentication. And now comes the part of authorization. So once you're authenticated, you have to store this token somewhere, right? And this token has an expiration date, which we can set on our backend, right? So we can set it to 2 days, 1 days, 3 days, or whatever, right? Okay. So, and the second thing is once you have the token, now using this token, you can basically uh, get the other details, right? And if you want to fetch user data, let's say user profile, you're visiting user profile URL, you want to fetch the user data, right? So, if you want to do that, you must be authorized, right? User one can basically request for user one's profile data only, not user two's, right? So this is basically where the token comes in the picture, and that is what is authorization, right? So we have client, and client will send the request with the token. Server will verify that token, that is this token of user one's. If not, then it will give an error. If it is, it will return the data, right? This is the authorization process. So now let's go to the main part, guys, which is our coding part, and let's code this system out, right? We will be using Node.js. That's awesome. So let me just quickly open the application, guys, and we can start with that. So I'll open item. So in my terminal, we will create a folder, React Node auth, right? So this is my folder, and so guys, I what I am doing is I will create one single repo, right? And I will push everything in that repo, right? So we will be having a server. Yes, Abhishek, good question. How this token is sent and what this token actually is, this unique token, we will definitely come to that. Don't worry, Abhishek and everyone. We will see it when we are coding, right? So don't worry about that. Okay. Okay, let me just increase the font size, guys, for you. Okay, so we have these two things. Okay, so we will create two folders, uh, server and the front end will basically create using create react app, right? So guys, I hope you basically have I mean create react app tool. We will be using create react app to create our front end, right? So if you can see in my react node auth, we have just a server repo right now, server directory, right? And now using create react app, I will basically uh, create the front end part, right? So, hmm. So Dipankar, we will see in a moment how would we create our what do you say, these uh, server functionalities. Don't worry about that. We will see. But first, let's just focus on the server part, right? CD server, and let's quickly open this. So in the meanwhile, I'll also answer questions. Hmm, okay. So guys, any questions you have, just throw it in the chat box, and we'll definitely answer those questions. Hmm. So Dheeraj, again, we will be discussing about the token. Don't worry about that. We will discuss about the token in detail in a while when we see what it is, right? So first we will basically code it, and then we'll see what token is, how it is sent, and everything, right? Okay. So I am basically creating index.js file. So guys, please, do code along with me if it is possible again. If it's not, then it's fine. But I will create a repo right now, and I will give you the URL for the repo, and I'll push each and everything over here, right? So, hmm. Yes, Dishant, it is absolutely possible to create this in Windows. It is absolutely possible. Uh, Aditya, please, just go and search for create React app, and you would be able to do that. So just search for that, right? I'll create a new repo, and I think let's just create it separate so that you guys are not confused. um, node auth, right? So let's just create node auth. It should be public and git ignore. Nope, nope, nope. Let's create it. Okay. So it will create a repo for me, and let me just copy this. And okay, I will do git remote add origin. Okay. Okay. I'll have to first do git init, git remote add origin. Okay, so origin is added. Let me just do a few changes. Okay, guys. So I think our Git repo is set up right now. Okay, guys. So what we will be using is we will be using Node.js. I hope everyone has installed Node.js or has this in Node.js on a system. We will be using Node.js and Express, right? So let's just quickly download. First, what we have to do is we have to do npm init. So this is basically to initialize our folder directory as a npm package, right? Okay, so package name is server, version is nothing. Okay, so we just quickly do this. Just press enter, 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 and everything. It will give you a package.json, right? This will tell that this particular folder is managed by npm, right? Yes, guys, I'm using VS Code, so you can use Sublime Text or basically anything, right? So what we want to do is we want to install Express, Morgan, and we'll see Passport. So guys, install these three things. We will definitely see what this is and everything. So we will be using Express along with Node.js to run our application, run our backend, right? So let's just install these three things and we learn what these three things do in a moment. So again, guys, if you have any questions, I mean, just let me know. Okay. Hmm. Okay. Okay, so our packages are basically installed. So again, guys, we Express is basically a framework which is used with Node.js for our backend. We will be using that, and we have Morgan, which is basically, um, I mean, just what do you call? Uh, hmm it basically just gives you information about what request is coming to your server and things like that, right? So it is that. So we will see that in command line. So if you hit a get request, post request, or anything, it will give us that particular information, right? And Passport is the library which we will be using um, to basically do all of this stuff, right? I told you that we have to give a token and everything. So all of that stuff will basically be done by Passport, right? Okay. Hmm. So, just a second, guys. Okay, guys. So I hope you're familiar with basics of Node.js. If not, we will basically uh, start again. So what we will be doing is we will be creating different folders for different things, right? So let's do that quickly. We'll do new file. Sorry, not new file, new folder. We will create a config folder. This configuration folder will be for our configuration of our DB, right? What our database will be and things like that. We will have a new folder which will be controllers, right? Controller. This will basically have our controllers, and we'll talk about that in a while. We will have models. So this model is basically how our data should be structured in a database, right? We'll again talk about it in a while. We have models, controllers, config. We will have routes as well. Routes is basically, I mean, the route. I mean, if you want to, let's say, go to home, you want to go to contact us, you want to go to some page else, let's say user profile and things like that. So all of these routes will be mentioned over here. And I think that is pretty much it, right? Uh, yes, guys, I will send those. I will send the link, guys, to the GitHub repo on the chat. Let me just code a uh, few projects, few files. Then I'll basically add this code onto the GitHub repo, and I'll share the GitHub repo as well. Okay, don't worry about that. So let's just set up our basic quick server, right? So we will be using Express, right? So first I'm just setting up my server. This will be using server. I will basically using this Express. I will start my server, right? So it will run on port, let's say 8000, right? And we will have our app. This will be Express. We will simply call Express. Right. So guys, using this Express, it will basically give me the handle of app. And now what I can do is using this app, I can basically just start my server, right? So I will do app.listen and I will be listening on port. This will be my port, right? So my default port is basically 8000. So whatever you have, you can just write it over here and it will also take a callback. If any error occurs, it will just throw an error, right? So if there is error, I'll just write error as well, console.log error, right? Cool. Or I'll just say console.log running server is running. This is my basic setup for my server, right? Right now it won't do anything because again we have not specified any routes or anything right now over here. But this is just a basic setup for my server, right? So now what I want to do is, first of all, I just want to basically use routes, right? Again, what are routes? For example, if you want to go to slash home, then you will specify that, hey, you will show this page or you will want to give this data, right? Those are routes. So for that, what we want to do is we would use like this. We will say app.use if any, basically any route comes in. If any request comes through through this slash, we will basically want to use routes. So what this line is basically saying is if any request comes to the server which starts with hash, it can be anything, not hash, sorry, slash home slash user profile slash pretty much anything. You just have to basically go to the routes folder and figure out them, right? Then we'll basically write routes and we'll see, we'll tell in that routes folder that, hey, if you get slash home, then go and show this data or send this data. If you get slash user profile, send this data and things like that, right? So this is routes. So let's create a few routes, guys. And in my routes, what I'll do is I'll create a folder API. Since basically we have discussed in the at the starting of the session that we will basically be creating APIs, and we know that single page application, which will be a React application, will be interacting with our server, with our Node server via an API, right? So we will be creating APIs. So in routes folder, let's create index.js as well. Right, so in our routes folder, what I've done is I've basically created an index.js file and also the API folder, right? So inside this API folder, we will write our user API, login API, and things like that, right? So let's just quickly write express equals to require express, right? And now what we want to do is we will first do express dot router, and now everything will make sense. Just wait, router dot use API require API module dot exports equals to router. Okay, guys, not this. It should be use. So what is happening over here, guys, is that again, if I go to this line, what will happen is app.use slash any request to the server will go to the routes folder. In routes folder, index.js file will be invoked, and it will say, hey, if the request starts with slash API, then it will redirect to the API folder, right? And which is this one, right? So we will definitely do that. Let me just quickly commit this code. Get add all. Okay, I'll have to add git ignore file also. So let's add a git ignore file. Why I'm doing it? Because I want to ignore the node modules folder, right? So now if I do git status, you see I don't have node modules over here. I don't want to push node modules, right? You never push it. So I'll do git add all, git commit -m, and create basic server. Okay, and do push to master no dot. So guys, this is the URL. So this is my GitHub URL, and if I refresh, it should show me the URL, right? Okay, guys. So let me just put this URL, guys, on the chat as well. So guys, the URL for this GitHub repo is on the chat. Okay. So you have all the latest data which I have created, right? So you have all the you have the repo uh, in the chat, guys. Okay. So guys, again, this is basically for I'm just giving you a glimpse of Node.js, and again, authentication authorization. You uh, will have to know obviously Node.js in order to uh, do it. But I'll basically, you don't have to worry about it. Don't understand the code, guys. I'll basically give you what this thing basically means, right? I'm telling you how it is functioning and everything, right, in Node. So you can learn Node very quickly. It's not that hard, right? This is a very basic way to start the server, right? And you have Express server, you start the port and everything, you begin the server like this, right? And we will basically start and see how it is happening, right? Anyways, so we have our routes over here, we have our API, we have our index.js file, and I have basically pushed everything over there, right? And again, all of these folders, config, controller, and models will not push because they are empty right now, but they will definitely get pushed once I make them, right? So in our API folder, I will create another index.js file, and I create a new file, users.js, right? So our users.js file, guys, this is basically the file which will have the routes of our user files, right? Of our user. Let's just go and copy the routes from here. And so now what I'll basically say is in this particular API index.js file that, hey, if the request is coming from users for users, if it contains users, just use the uh, users file, right? This is the users.js file. If the request is basically slash users, it contains slash users, just use the users file, which is this one, users.js, right? Again, let's understand what is happening. So let's say we hit the API, let's say slash API slash login, right? Then what will happen? And I'll just go through the whole process. So our index.js file is basically the root file. We will come over here, right? It will basically see a sixth line. It will say, hey, the request contains slash, which is the very beginning slash, right? It will use the routes folder, right? So let's say in our server, we have index.js. It says that if it has slash API in it, use the API folder. Yes, it has the slash API in it, right? We will use the API folder. And again, index.js file is the file which is basically the root file for each and every folder, right? It will come over here, right? It will say that, hey, is this slash API slash users slash login contains slash users? Yes, it contains slash users. Then hey, use the users file, right? Users, this one, users.js file. This is the file. And here what we will do is again paste the same thing over here. And now here we will have our original routes. So we will say router.get slash, and here we will use some function, right? So for this request basically means we are getting a request for API slash users, right? This basically means that if we have a request for login, this is a request for login, right? And this basically is a request for sign up. So now you basically understand how these things basically, I mean, are aligned together. So we go to slash, then we basically, it tells to go to routes folder, we go to routes index file, it tells to go to API folder, API index file tells to use the users file, which is this one over here. So this is our basic routes, guys. Basic routes. Okay, guys, I will increase the font size. Yeah. So these are our basic routes. And so eventually what will happen is what we want to send some data for this particular slash, we will basically write a function for it, right? We will basically write a function for it. And what does function look like is like this. So what will happen is in this particular function, you will have request as well as response, right? So request is basically whatever request is coming to the server, and response is basically what you want to send, right? So let's say for this particular thing, we'll say this dot status 200, and since we are basically using APIs, so we will be sending JSON data. True, right? So let's look this thing in action. So what I'll do is ls, I'll just have to do node index.js. That's it. Using node index.js, it says server is running, right? And how it is, because in our index.js file, which is the very main file, it says server is running, right? We have it running on port local host 8000. So let's open it. And again, we have created the APIs, guys, right? We don't have anything currently running. So let's just use that particular uh, mm, route which we have created, user slash. So here you can basically see, which is I'm using slash API slash users slash, and this gives me success equals to true. And it is coming from where? In index.js file of our server. It basically comes over here. It says it finds slash, which is this one, the very first one, right? This one, the very first one, right? And it will say that go to routes folder. Route folder is this one. It will go to index.js file. It say that does it contain API? Yes, it contains API, right? It contains API, the URL. It will say go to the API folder. We go to the API folder, index.js file will be called. It says, does it contain users? Yes, it does contain users. This one over here. Then it basically says to use the user file. We use the user file over here. And yes, this is the exact URL. And we will have success equals to true as the JSON thing, right? This is the response which we are sending from our server using user slash, right? I hope up until this it is clear. Uh, Again, it will be a little bit difficult if you are basically new to Node.js, but I mean, this is how we create a simple server, and this is a very basic API which does not do anything. It basically just sends you a JSON object with success equals to true. That's it, nothing else. So let me just push it, guys. Status. Um, Commit -m basic API. So I have committed the code as well. You can find it in the repo, guys. And but generally what happens is whatever this particular logic is, this will basically go into a controller, right? So currently I'm just making APIs for users. So if you're making API, let's say if you have an e-commerce site for Flipkart, if you're creating APIs to get a product information, to set a product information, things like that, you will have a different products file over here in API. There will be products.js, right? And all this logics for product APIs will be handled by products controller, right? So in controllers, we'll now create the user API, right? The user API controller. So here, let's create a new folder, which will be API. Which will be API. And inside this controller folder, what we will have is we will have the API folder wherein we will have the file users api.js. So whatever logic for that particular route handling will go to this controller. Again, if you guys know the MVC structure, M is for basically model. Model is basically storing the data of the application. View is basically the view, whatever you are going to see, and controller is basically the which handles the business logic part, right? So now let's move this function to this file over here, right? So let's name this function index. So this is our index out because we have slash over there, right? So we have our function index, and now what I want to do is I just want to export module dot exports function, and we'll send the index function, right? And now in my users folder, I will basically users.js file, sorry, I will basically import that particular user's API file, and then I'll use that controller, right? So let's do that. We'll say const user API controller require. It is basically in the controllers folder, right? And in the API folder, the user API, right? And now using this controller API controller user, let's name it users. Yep, let's name it users. Now using this controller API, I'll just call the index method, right? Or this particular slash, which is basically means slash API slash users slash, it will be handled by users API controller file, and the function name is index, right? Let's see if this works. Let me refresh. For that, you basically have to start the server again. But again, what you can do is you can use nodemon, which is a service which will basically automatically restart your server when you make changes, right? So I'll do index.js. So nodemon is basically a service which will automatically start the server when you have made some changes, right? So we have some error, which is let's see. Do we have exports over here and res? Awesome. Module.export. Okay. So it should be exports because we haven't exported anything over here. That's why it's not able to get anything over here, right? And here you see, I basically changed something. It automatically restarted my server for me, right? So if I refresh, it should work fine. I have success equals to 2, right? So this is a very first basic API which we have created, right? Okay. Okay, guys. So again, if you have any questions, just go on and uh, uh, ask those questions in the chat, right? So how do we test our APIs, right? So to test our APIs, we basically use Postman, guys. So Postman is basically a software to test APIs, right? So let it just open and then we'll see. Okay. So here you can see I've sent the request to localhost 8000 slash API slash users. Let me see if I can increase the size. Yep. I've sent the request to localhost slash API slash users, right? And it has basically given me uh, success equals to true, right? This is the request, and this is a basic response, right, which I'm getting from the server, right? If I basically change this to false, you'll see I'll get a different response. Now this is false, right? So using this Postman, we'll first test our APIs, and then we will basically use React with these APIs, right? We will build a project with that, uh, and let me just push it, guys. Let me just push the code and git commit -m controllers. I hope you guys have got the code. If you are using the repo, so just clone the repo, guys. If you are joining in late, just clone the repo. You can follow along then, and we can start with that. Okay. So we have what we have is we have created our very first API, which is a very simple basic API, which is slash users, right? So now what we are going to do is we will create our login API, right? And for that, what we need to do is first we basically have to create a model, right? So let's go to our models folder. Let me just close all this. So we will create a new file which will be user.js. So we are basically creating a user model, right? So for that, what we need is we again, guys, we will be using MongoDB to store our data. So MongoDB will be our database. So we will do the configuration of MongoDB just in a moment. But before that, let's just create the model for user, right? So model, again, what does model means? Model is basically how would you structure, how would you store your data in the database, right? So we have to first install Mongoose. So what is Mongoose? Mongoose is basically a package which basically helps you use MongoDB in a much more easy way, right? You can directly go ahead and use MongoDB, but if you want to get something from MongoDB and if you want to retrieve something, write something, or uh, do updates or anything, so Mongoose package will make it easier for us to basically use MongoDB, right? It would make our lives easier, right? So let's do that. We'll say const mongoose equals to require mongoose, right? And const user schema. This will be our user schema. And what we do is we say new mongoose dot schema. We'll create a new object, new user schema object, and we will pass it some details, right? As an object. So let's say for user, what do you want to store in our database? We want to store the email, we want to store the password and the name, right? So I want to store email, but what I want to do is, what is an email, right? Email should be of type string, right? We have to specify much more details. Email should be of type string. Required should be true. If I'm going to create a user object in a database, it should be true. Email should be true. It will be unique for everyone, right? It will be unique. Email should be unique. And I also have a password. Let's copy this. I also have a name, right? So we will have our password. It will be string, type string. Required is true. Unique should not be there. Our name type should be string. Required should be true. Unique should not be there. Right? Again, name can be common, right? And now what I want to do is, if I want to pass extra parameters, I can basically pass extra parameters using an object at the end to schema, right? I can pass two objects to schema. First is basically the basic definition of a user model, of a user schema, what I want to store in the database, right? And the second thing is basically I want to store timestamps. So whenever a user is created, so they will be created at, and things like that, uh, automatically created for us, right? And the last thing to do is we'll say const user equals to mongoose dot model. We want to create the user model, right? This is the user model. This would be the name for our table, right? We will use user schema for that. And I just have to do module dot exports equals to user. So we have basically created the user schema, and just in a while we'll basically see, when we create some data, we'll visualize it in the MongoDB as well, right? How it is being stored. This is a basic Mongoose version, right? Mongoose schema, sorry. And now let's configure our MongoDB, right? So it's very easy to do. So I just create a new file, mongoose.js. So in our config folder, which will basically have all the configurations. So what we're doing is we are basically configuring our MongoDB. So using again mongoose.js, I want to configure it, right? So we'll say const mongoose equals to require mongoose, right? And I want to say mongoose dot connect. So it says, if you basically use VS Code, it says that connect is basically a function, opens the default mongoose connection, right? I want to open the connection to it. And I want to basically specify the path. I want to basically specify uh, what database name should be there, right? So I will be using local hosts only. I will be using MongoDB, my local machine, right? This is how you do it. You basically just do this MongoDB // localhost, and whatever the name for your DB should be, right? So let's say for this, let's say do cn node auth. So using this connection, what will happen is this DB, CN node auth DB, will be created for me uh, in my local MongoDB, right? So I hope everyone has installed MongoDB in their machines. If not, what you have to do is you have to do npm I MongoDB, right? Sorry, not npm. You have to basically do brew install if you're in a Mac. If you are using Windows, just go to MongoDB website and download the MongoDB package from there, right? MongoDB exe file from there. Okay, so what you have to do is you have to start your MongoDB, right? So how do I do that in a Mac? I just do brew services start MongoDB community. So I've installed this particular version. I just have to do brew services start MongoDB community, right? So it is basically saying that it has already started. I've already started. My MongoDB is running in the background, right? So just to verify if it is running, I'll do ps minus ef grep MongoDB. Hmm. So here you can see this particular process is running for me in the background, right? MongoDB is running for me, right? So I hope everyone has uh, installed MongoDB in their systems. If not, guys, please do install MongoDB, right? And mm, right, install MongoDB and start it using the command brew services start MongoDB community, right? Just do brew start brew install MongoDB community, right? Just install it and start it, right? Using this command. It is already started for me, but you can start it, right? Okay, cool. So we have basically made a connection and we can verify it as well, right? So it will give me the DB. This will basically be our DB, right? The connection which we have basically established will be our DB, right? We will be using this term and we'll say DB on error. And again, guys, this is all happening by me using Mongoose, right? Uh, this is very simple for me. You can use directly MongoDB as well, right? You can use directly MongoDB as well, but I'm using Mongoose. It makes our life simpler, right? I want to do console.error.bind, and again, if you go and just go through browse through the docs of Mongoose as well, you will find each and everything over there also, right? How to make a connection, how to, I mean, get the error if there is an error, right? So this is how we do it in connecting to DB, right? So it will give us an error. If there is an error, db dot once open. This is when our DB connection is successful and everything works. This function will be fired. Success fully connected to database MongoDB. So once our connection is there, this function will be fired once our connection is set up. Once everything is fine, I'll do module.exports db. So now we basically have done the configuration as well, right? But still there's one thing missing, which is what we have to use. We have to basically call this db somewhere, right? We have to use this particular module somewhere. Where would we do that? In an index.js file, which is the very most root part. What we will do is we will get the db from here. Again, what we have to do is we just have to get the db, we just have to require the db over here, right? Because if we don't do that, our config slash mongoose.js file will not never be called, right? So our configuration will never be have done. So we'll say const db equals to require, and we'll say config slash mongoose, right? And you can just simply leave it like this also, that is also fine, but I generally like to do it like this. If I want to use db somewhere else in the code, I can do that as well, right? Let's go to our this particular thing. It says mongoose.connection is not a function. Okay, so let's go to mongoose.js file and see what's wrong. So mongoose.connection is not a function because okay, it is not a function because mongoose.connection over here you can see this will give me an object, right? And I'm using dot connection over here. This should be connect. I want to connect the MongoDB and this should be the connection, right? The connection, how do I get the connection once it is connected? Using mongoose.connection, right? This will give me an object and details about what is uh, the connection details about that particular DB, right? So here, if you guys can see, let me just start the server again. If I start the server again, here you can see at the very bottom that successfully connected to database MongoDB, right? So now we have basically successfully connected to our database as well, right? So now we have basically done the configuration for Mongoose as well, and we have created the schema of user as well, right? And now what the step remains is to just add data, right? Just to sign up and then log in. So these are the two next APIs which we will be creating. Okay, so let's quickly do that. First, let me just push all of this code. Status get add all, get commit -m, and I'll say db configurations, right? And I'll say push origin master. So everything should be latest and up to date for you guys. Okay, guys. So now let's quickly just go and create the user sign up, right? User sign up, which is basically I'll render a form and I'll have to sign up, right? So let's do that. This is our model. We have to basically go to routes in our API in our users.js. You can see this is a function. This function is again will be coming from here, user controller. Let's just remove everything from here and we'll say sign up, right? And let's go to controllers API, user API. We have to basically write a function as well over here. Function sign up. It will get a request. It will also get a response. This is a sign up function, guys, right? So what do we want to get as a sign up, right? So we will get four things basically: password, confirm password, and name as well as email. So once a user is signing up, we want to get the email, the confirm password, the password as well. We want to match confirm password and password, and we also want to get the name as well, right? So we get all of these things, and from where we do get these things, we basically get these things from request, right? We have this request over here, right? So everything data which is coming from front end to us, from API to us, to the backend, it will basically be in request dot body, and we'll see about that in a bit, right? So don't worry about that. We'll just console log request dot body and see. Okay, so what we want to get password. We will get confirm password, right? And we want to just rename this confirm password because it has a snake case. We want to rename this to confirm password like this. We will be using camel case, right? We just want to rename it because from the API, it will be coming like this snake case. We will get the email, we will get the name, right? We will get these things. We'll just console log these things, right? What will happen? Let's see. I will do console.log rec.body. Let's use our postman for that. So let's close all of these things. We don't need it. We will create another request. And again, guys, just remember that our user request, sign up request should be a post request, right? This should be a post request. So this should be a post request and it should be slash sign up, right? And again, we want to send body and we will send as JSON. Okay. So one thing that here we have to do, guys, is in order for our server to basically to receive request as JSON, what we want to do is we want to do one more thing over here in our index.js file, not this one, the main one, right? And again, guys, this use and everything using this dot use function, we basically can use multiple middlewares, right? So let's use Morgan as well. So I'll do app.use Morgan tiny, and I'll use app.use. And here I want to tell that here, whatever request is coming from the client side, I want to convert that into JSON, right? So for that, I'd use express.json. So what will happen is whatever data and request which is coming from the client side to the server, it will be converted for me in JSON. So in request.body, I would be able to access it like this, right? As objects. Okay, let's require Morgan as well. Morgan equals to require, and you'll see what Morgan is in a minute. So let me just remove all of this, and I'll say sign up. I want to send name, right? Name should be, let's say, T. I want to send email. It should be t@t.com. I'll say password. It should be 123. I'll say confirm password. It will be 123 as well, right? Since JSON, I do a send. You see, it will basically hang over here because we are not sending any response, right? Here you can see we're not sending any response via this controller, right? We're not sending anything. But here you can see this is our body, right? I'm doing console log request.body over here, right? Request.body over here. This is our response. Name is T, email is this, password is this, confirm password is this. Awesome. So now what we're going to do is we have got the email and password and confirm password, everything with us. Now what we want to do is we want to first create the user, right? But again, before creating the user, let's go to the diagram. Okay. This is the login scenario which we discussed, the sign up scenario we didn't discuss, right? So let's discuss about that as also. So in sign up, what will happen is, guys, you will send the data to the server. The server will have to first make some checks. So let's do that. So we will have to first make some checks like if password not equal equals to confirm password, we will throw an error, right? We will throw an error. We will basically have to throw an error, res.status equals to, we'll send a status as 500. JSON should be error. We'll say password should match, right? And this is the first error which we handle, right? And we also have to handle if there is not name, if name is not coming or user is not sending the email, I want to send another error, right? And here I want to say name and email compulsory. Okay, so this is the other two errors which we have basically handled. And so what will happen, guys? So if you have basically gone through these things, all of this verification and everything is done, password confirm password are correct. What you want to do is you want to create a user, right? For that, what we do is we say const user is await user dot find one. And again, guys, one thing to note over here is obviously you will not just randomly create a user, right? Once you get the email, you want to first check that, hey, is this user available in our database or not, right? If the user is already available in our database, I don't want to create another one, right? So if user is already available to us, we won't create another one, right? That's why we basically first find the user using the email. And this is how we basically do queries in MongoDB using Mongoose, right? We need to basically import user as well. const user equals to require, it will be coming from models user, right? Using that user, we will find that if the user exists or not. If the user does not exist, only then we will um, basically have to or can create a new one, right? That's the thing. Okay. So let's just find some errors over here, right? So let's just remove different, let's just send different confirm password and password, right? If I do that, if I do that, here you can see at the bottom it says password should match, right? And this is happening because, again, why? We have set the error that we basically are checking password and confirm password. If these two does not match, we will send the error from the server that password should match, right? Passwords are not matching. Let's not send an email, right? Let's name, sorry. So password should match. Let's match the password, name and email compulsory, right? This is the error which is coming from our backend, our Node.js server, right? Awesome. That sounds awesome. Okay. Hmm. So now guys, what we want to do is let's do a try catch over here, right? So now what I want to do is if and only if the user is not found, right? I'll say if there is no user, I want to create a user, right? And again, guys, let's just quickly create one first. We'll say const created user equals to, and just like there's find one, we also have a create method, which is again via Mongoose. So now you see how it's simple it makes our lives, right? We don't have to do a lot of work. We'll find name, email, and password. So all of these three things which we have stored in a database, right? All of these three things are there in the model. So here you can see models, user, we have email, password, and name. These three things we are storing: name, email, and password, right? So now what we're going to do is we'll basically simply say if created user, if the user is created, then awesome. Then we just basically have to send the user data, right? We'll say return response. Let's copy this one. So once the user is created, what we want to send is the code for create successful creation is basically 201, right? This code for successful creation. We will say name should be created user dot name. We will send the email as well, user dot email, and we will send the ID, the user ID. Awesome. Okay, guys. So if the created user is successful, creation is successful, we will send all of this stuff. If not, what we want to do is we want to basically send another bad request. So if user is not created, obviously. So here you can see we are creating a user over here, and we are saying if user is created successfully, we will return the status 201. If not, we will return status 500, and it will give me an error. Let's say something went wrong, right? Okay, one more thing to note over here is we are using this if statement over here, right? This one. This is the if statement. Yeah, this is the if statement, right? If there is not user, but if the user is there, what does that mean? We have to send another error message, which basically says that user already exists. Right? So what is happening, guys? So what we're doing is we're finding the user over here. If the user is not found, only then we are creating a user. But if the user is found, we basically send the error user already exists. Let's try this out. Okay. Okay. So let's send the name as well. T, and let's see, we are sending a correct success message as well. Already exists, something went wrong. Also, we want to send message over here. User created successfully. Let's make it at the top, save it, right? Save it, and now let's send the request. I sent the request. Let's wait. And do we have any error? I don't think so. Okay. Okay, okay. Okay, we have not caught the error as well. Let's catch the error as well. So we will just send the error at as it is. So I think we have some error, but it did not show any error because we did not catch the error, right? Let's send the request. It says error. Did we send the error? Uh, Also, let's console log it. Okay, let's send the request again. Send the request. We get an error. It gives me an error. Password is not defined. Where is the password coming from? Password. Password. So password is over here. At which line does it says? 32 line number. Okay. Okay, so here password is not defined. It says, okay, it should basically come from here. Okay, constant password. The spelling mistake is wrong. Password. Now I think everything should work. We'll send the request. It says user created successfully, and we have name, T, as well as the password, and not the password, sorry, email and ID. So let's see where this is. So if you want to see, if you want to visualize your MongoDB, just download Robo3T. I'm not going to do it uh, on what do you say? I'm not going to do it on terminal, but here you just, it'll automatically connect to your local MongoDB running on a system. Just do connect. And once you do connect, it will basically give you this. So all the tables which you have basically created, all the databases which you have created, sorry, will appear on the left hand side. So let's just see what we have created, cn node auth. So if you go over here, if you see collections, can I increase the font size? I cannot increase the font size, guys. But if you see users table, right, in the collections, you can see the users table. Just click on users table, double click over here, and you see this object over here, right? We have the name, t email t@t.com, password is 123, and you see the timestamp which we use in the schema, user schema. It automatically created at as well as updated at fields for me, right? So all of this is happening again by Mongoose. That is why. Okay, that is fine. So we have successfully created the user, right? We have successfully signed up the user, right? So I hope this is you are able to understand this, guys. Uh, but one thing what remains over here is you can see that password is not encrypted, right? So we can do it. It is pretty easy. We have to use a library called bcrypt, bcrypt, but I'm not going to use it, but it is pretty simple to do it. You just have to decrypt, encrypt the password before saving. That's it. Okay, so we have our successful creation of our user, right? And here you can see this is what Morgan does for me, right? It basically gives me that post request is sent to slash API slash users, 201 requests is this, and this is the time it takes to finish the request. This is what the Morgan package does for me. Right, awesome. So guys, I think this is created. So let's just go and work on a login API for now. So let me just push this first as well. Hmm. Sign up API. Okay, guys, I've pushed the latest code up onto the master branch. You can see it over here if I refresh. Yep. So we have the sign up API as well, right? We have the configuration as well. We have the sign up API as well. Okay, guys. So I think it is taking a lot of time for us. I'm not sure if we are able, if we will be able to do the React part for now. If not, we will definitely take that up in the next session, in the next bootcamp session, or a next short webinar, right? So let's just concentrate on understanding and creating things with Node first, and then jump onto React, right? This webinar will end at 10 p.m. guys, but I mean, I'm not sure if I'll be able to do, I mean, both of these things, React as well. Let's see what happens. So let's just move on to the login API. So we have created two APIs. One is the very simple one, just a index API, nothing much. Next is the sign up API, right? And this is the API for sign up. Next, we will do the login API. Okay, so login scenario. We have already discussed login scenario, right? So what is, I mean, how login happens? Let's come to the diagram. So we have the client over here, right? We have the server on the left hand side. Client will basically send the email and password. Server will have to check the very first scenario. Is the email password good combination? Is the password correct for that particular email? If yes, it will basically send a token, right? So now guys, let's discuss about this token, what this token actually is. Okay. So this token is basically called as JSON Web Token, or the JWT token, right? This is what this token stands for. We do call it JWT token, right? And this JWT token is basically used to then authorize different functions, right? If you want to get the access of your user data, you will basically send this token, right? This JWT token with you, right? In the headers, as pointed out earlier. So we use that. So let's see what this JWT is. Uh, okay, what was the website? Hmm. Okay, so guys, here you can see this is the JSON Web Token. This is the very unique token which I was talking about earlier, which is different for different people, right? And what it does is it basically has uh, three things, right? This is the whole unique token which will be given to you, right? And this token has three parts. I'm not sure if which was the right website. I think this one is the one. It will show it to you more clearly, right? Yep. Absolutely. Yep. So here you can see this is the encoded JWT token, right? So it has basically three parts to it, right? Uh, this token is divided into three parts. The very first part is this one, this is red color. So here you can see this is the red part, right? And what this information is basically, it basically tells whatever this token, by which algorithm this token is basically being encrypted in, right? We are sending that. So here you can see I'm using the algorithm HS256 to encode this particular token, right? and the type is JWT, nothing else. So this first part of this particular whole token will basically be telling us that which algorithm which we use, right? This ping part is the payload data, the user data which you want to send. Generally, it is basically this. Here you can send name. Here you can send when the token is issued at. Here you can send whatever you want to send, right? Here you can send the email as well and different things, right? So, and the right last thing over here, this one is basically the signature, right? So what happens is when you send this, when you create this token before sending it to the client side, the server will sign this token for you, right? The server will sign this token using these things. It will use the header, it will use the payload, and it will use some secret to sign this particular token, right? This is the header. Header basically means uh, whatever method you are using to basically encrypt this token, right? Payload is the data which you want to send to the client side. And this signature is basically using these three things, secret, header, and payload to sign your data. And why do we have to sign it? So once you send this token to this client side, and now what client wants is client wants the access of, let's say, user information, user data for user profile. You send this token back to the server. Now server can verify that is this the correct signature, right? Is this the correct signature which the server sent? If it is, that means this token is valid and it is not tampered with, right? So generally what can happen is you can just take this token, you can ideally, remove the name, for example, over here. And as I remove the name, you can see this particular data is changed, right? The payload data, just have a look at it. If I do John, if I do John Doe, it will basically just change the payload, right? And if you change the payload, you know that the signature will also change, right? And once, let's say the server sends the data as John Doe, right? You remove John from it, right? And you send it this particular new token to the server. But now the server will recognize that, hey, this signature does not matches the signature with John Doe's, right? It basically means you have tampered with the token, and it will basically automatically reject your request, and it will show you as unauthorized, right? So this is basically the whole agenda of using JWT, and gladly, thankfully, we don't have to do all of these steps, right? So all of these steps, what do I mean by that? So once you send the token, you will send this token with every request in header so that the server knows you are authorized to do this action, right? So server will take this token, it will just check if this token is valid or not, is this token is verified or not, using a signature and everything, if it is valid or not. If it is, it will basically continue sending the request whatever the success response is. If it is not, it will give you an unauthorized error, unauthorized, right? So all of this stuff is handled by passport.js. This is the passport library which we will be using to do all of this stuff, and it will make very easy for us. We don't have to do all of this stuff uh, by manually. It will automatically be done for us by passport, right? So let's see how we can do that, guys. So now we basically will use the passport library, right? For that, let's go to the index.js file, which is the root file, index.js. This is the root file. So for that, we have to basically get passport as well. Require passport. Awesome. So we have got the passport over here, right? And now what we want to do is we just have to initialize passport as well. And we generally do it at the end over here, just after the server has started. We just say passport.initialize. That's it. We just call that function. And using this, we have basically initialized passport. And again, we'll go with the flow as well, guys. But for this, what we want to do is we want to tell passport that, hey, I want to use this JWT mechanism for authentication and authorization, right? I want to use this JWT mechanism for authorization. I have to tell Passport to do it, right? So for that, we have to do some configuration, right? So let's do that configuration. So I'll go to config, new file, Passport. I'll name it Passport JWT, and we call it strategy. So guys, Passport has multiple ways. I mean, if you know that we have multiple ways of doing authentication and authorization, right? So here we are using JWT strategy. So there are different strategies. So for example, there is mm, manual strategy. For example, when you use email and password combination, if you are using session-based authentication, right? If you're using session-based authentication, there's a different strategy for that. If you're using social login, or social sign up using Google login or Facebook login, something like that. If you're using that, that is a different strategy. Okay, the different strategies in Passport itself. You just have to go and check out the passport.js libraries website. There are a lot of different strategies over there, right? So you can use any strategy you want. Here we are using the JWT strategy using the JSON web token, right? But there are different strategies like social login and things like that, right? But here we will be using Passport JWT. So let's do const passport equals to require passport. First we'll require password, then we want to get the JWT strategy. How do we do that? For that we have to download another package. Let's do that. We'll say npm I passport JWT. JWT. So there are different strategies to do authentication and authorization, guys, right? So you can basically, I mean, get any strategy from the passport library. I'm using passport.jwt. Using the passport library, I just have to initialize it. Then I tell which strategy I want to use. For this, I'm using passport JWT strategy. So I will use passport JWT, right? And this will give me the package, and from this I want to use strategy. And now what I want to do is extract JWT. And again, I'll just go through all of this, guys, when I'm coding, when I'm using this function. But for the meanwhile, just copy and use this, right? And I'll also have to get user. We'll check why we want user over here in a bit. I want to go to models, user, and there will be, and as I told you, that we have a secret as well. Secret. Right? Here we discuss in this particular thing, while signing, it requires a secret as well, right? So what secret, you can basically have any secret. I'm just writing a secret string over here. You can use anything, right? And we will use some options over here. I'll just explain what that basically is just in a while. From request, yep, from request, from auth header as bearer token, secret, okay. Okay, guys. So now here comes the meaty part, which basically says I tell that I want to use the JWT strategy, right? And this will basically have two options. I have to pass two options. First is options, right? And second is a callback function. Okay, so let's talk about this, guys. First, let's export it as well. Passport. Okay, guys. So here we're using the JWT strategy, right? So now here we want to give the options as well, right? And as I told you that once we get the token in the client side, we send this token as header in other requests, right? To tell the server that, hey, we are authorized to perform this action. So we are telling here the JWT strategy that, hey, I want to extract the JWT token, the token from the headers as bearer token, right? And what that basically means is when you are sending a request from client side, how do you send the request? You send the request something like this. In headers, you do something like this. Bearer, or let me write it over here. You do something like this. Bearer and this token, right? You send the request in headers like this. There's a different mechanism. Again, we'll see that in a later session that how we have to send this token, because today we cannot complete it. But yeah, so we send it like this. And here you can see that it has different methods, right? If I go do from, you can see from auth header as bearer token, from auth header with scheme, or you can basically get this JWT from cookies as well, right? Or you can just send this particular JWT token directly in headers or in cookies or in anywhere you want, right? So I'll be using from auth header as bearer token, right over here. So it basically up to you. I'm using this one, and this is what it basically means, these options, right? So whenever the request is coming to a private URL, for example, it's a slash user profile, client wants to get the data for user profile, it will get the token from headers as bearer token. It will get the token, it will verify for us automatically, and it will then if it is not verified, if it is false, if something is wrong, it will throw unauthorized. If it is not, it will let the request continue, go to the controllers, right? This is what happens. And let's just do this callback over here, right? What this callback is, it will get the JWT payload, right? So once everything is verified that, hey, this token is valid, this callback will be called for us, right? And this payload is basically this payload, whatever is stored in the JWT token. This is the payload. And passport library will automatically decode the payload to me and will get the payload to me. It will give the payload to me, right? So here what we'll do is we'll say const user equals to await user dot find by primary key. That basically means payload.id. So once we're creating the user, what we want to send in the payload is to the client, we'll also send the ID of the user, right? And why do we want to send the ID? Here you can see that once the request is coming for some authorized, from some private URL, I want to get the ID, user ID from that payload. I want to check that, hey, is this user existing or not, right? I'll have to check, hey, if this is a user, I'll return done. So this is basically the method comes with the as a second argument to this callback, right? So this done will basically have two things. First is the error, so there is no error, and second is the user object. So whatever we have gotten over here, right? So by calling this done method, it has two things. Second is the user object, first is the null error, right? If we have any error, then we'll send as null. uh, Currently we don't have any error, so we will not send anything over here. If we found the user, right? If the user is correct, we found the user. Second is basically the process that if the user is not found, it basically means something went wrong. So here we'll pass false. Here we'll say false that, hey, there was no user found using that payload, And again, this is basically the error, the first argument, right? So let's do a catch on this, and using this, we'll say console.log uh, error finding the user from JWT. And here again, we'll say done, null and false. This first argument, guys, this will be the error part, and it will automatically be handled by passport library. I don't have to do anything over here. Okay, so this is the callback, guys, which will happen once the verification of the JWT token is done, and if it is successful, it will give me the payload and the done function via this callback, and I just find the user, and I have to give that user the uh, to the passport library. I know it can be a little bit complicated, guys, but I think it is really important to understand this, right? Okay, cool. Hmm. Awesome. So now we basically set up our passport JWT strategy as well, right? And now let's just quickly call this library, right? Because we have to call this library as well in our index.js in order for us to use it. Let's call it, and we'll say config. This will be over here only, config passport JWT strategy, right? We will have to call this library as well in order for us to use it. Okay, guys, so now let's just quickly create the login functionality wherein we will create the token as well and send it to the user, right? So it's a very simple functionality. Let's just create the, let me just first comment, right? At all, use passport JWT strategy. Okay, push. Awesome. So now basically I will basically just have to do the last part, which is creating the sign up, sorry, the login API. We will get rec and res. Okay, guys, again, as we have done in the sign up functionality as well, where we get the password and all of these things from request.body. Similarly, we will get password and email from request.body, right? And now I have to do all of these things, right? I basically have to do find the user, basically user dot find one. Okay, so whatever the user, whatever the email I'm receiving from the form, I will basically get the user. I will find the user in the DB. If the user is not there, as we discussed, we have to send a response, which will be 500 or whatever you want to send, right? So let's send 500 and let's send invalid email or password. That basically means I did not get any user from the database. Okay. Okay. If not user, if there is no user found, or I can say if user dot password not equals to password. So what is happening here, guys? Again, if the password which user entered and if the user that I found using the email address, if those password does not match, I'll say invalid email or password, right? Or what I could have done is that if there is no user, I can just send another error that hey, you are not part of the website. You have to sign up, right? I could have done that, but I've handled it in one case, right? So now comes the good part when we have to create the JSON web token for uh, us to send in login, right? So let's create JSON data that we will send. We will send the token, and for the token, we basically, to create the token, we have to uh, use another library. Let's install that. It is called JSON Web Token. We will use the the token JSON Web Token library to create the token, right? Again, we don't have to do all of this stuff, the hashing and everything, encoding and everything. We don't have to use that, right? So at the top, we'll import it. We'll say const jwt equals to require and JSON Web Token. So this is the package, and all I have to do is very simple, guys, to create the token. Very simple. I'll just do jwt dot sign, right, and I'll also have to pass in the payload, the payload over here, what payload I want to send, right? So let's pass that payload. Payload for JWT equals to, I want to pass the ID again. Using this ID, I'm basically extracting the user from the token, right? This will be user.id. I'll send the name, user.name. I'll send the email, which will be user.email, right? And using this payload, I will sign it. Uh, Also, I want a secret, guys, right? This is the secret, right? And this secret should be the same which I'm using in the JWT strategy, this one. This JWT secret should be exactly the same, right? So I'm using secret over here. So I will use JWT secret, because using this secret only I'm encoding the token, and using this secret only I have to decode the token, right, guys? And also what I can do is I can basically say that it should expires in 2 days. I'll say the token will expires in 2 days. I'll say signed in successfully, right? And I'll say success equals to true. Now what I have to do is I just have to send this response. I'll say response dot status 200 dot JSON. I'll do JSON data. And I have to handle the error case as well. Using the error case, I'll just say like this. Error should be error. Awesome. Let me save it. And now we have the login API as well. I'll just use this login API, export this login API. Now in my routes, in my API, in my users file, in my login, I'll just utilize that. User login. Save it. And now let's see what happens. Okay, let's go to use login now. And again, guys, this should be again post request, not a get request. So we'll convert it to post, save it. And this should be a post request. And here you can see, guys, this is the authorization tab over here, right? So this is a tab wherein you basically send the token, right? So here you basically paste the token. So whatever the token which I'll get, JWT token, if you want to, I mean, use this Postman software to test your API, which is a private API, right? You have to use a token for it. So whatever token you get from login, you use it over here, right? So let's just use this login. We'll say raw, we'll use JSON, and let's see what was the email and everything from here. Email was t@t.com, which we created, right? t@t.com. And the password was 123, right? and I send it, I get some response. Nope, I did not. There is some error over here. Okay, we are using await. Uh, 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 over here, let's do async over here. This should be an async function. Let's make sure our user API is also an async function. This also should be an async function, right? Now I think everything should work. Yep. I'll send the login request. There is one error. Uh, I have to console log the error as well. Save it. Server will restart. Send the request again. Error is that cannot read property get of undefined. Okay. 88 line. Basically, JSON. Okay, okay. Okay, this should be resp, I guess. Or res. This should be res. Okay, okay. Okay, so let's send now. So here you see, guys, we have the token and we have successfully created the token. And this token is the token. The first part over here is the header part by which the mechanism that we uses to encrypt the token. Second part is the payload. This one is the payload. And what is the payload? Payload for us is this one: ID, name, and email, right? And the end part is the signature, which we sign over here, right? So using the JWT JSON Web Token library, JavaScript library, I'm able to generate the token. Signed in successfully, true. And now using this token, right? So for example, now uh, if I want to basically go for another URL, I want to hit another API, right? And this is users slash user profile. I want to hit this API now, right? And this API is basically a private API. That basically means that only the user who is logged in can access this, right? In order for us to use this API, what we want to do is in authorization, I will have to basically use bearer token, and here I have to pass the whole token, this token, and then I have to send the request. If I do not do it, it will give me unauthorized error, right? If this API is logged, if this API is basically private, I have to use this token, right? This authorization token, else it will give me unauthorized. And here you can see I'm using bearer token, right? Using this bearer token, I'm extracting the. So let's see what will happen. So I hit this request for all of this stuff, right? Now what will happen is passport JWT strategy will hit. This will be called, right? This extract JWT from auth headers as bearer token. It will extract the token from here. This is the token. It will get the token from header, and after getting the token, it will verify everything. Signature is fine, everything is fine. After everything is verified, it will basically call this method over here, which is the callback function. It will give me the payload as an object and the done function. And using this payload, I'm basically getting the user. If I get the user, I'll return done and give the user to the passport library. And now control gets back to passport library. So now passport library is saying that, hey, we have find the user as well. And basically means everything is fine. So now it will basically call the controller for me, right? The whatever the controller is being used for this particular route, right? Then it will call the controller for me. So this is the whole functionality, guys. I hope we have basically covered the authentication and authorization uh, for this. I hope you have understood this. If you have any questions, uh, let me know. Basically, if we are not able to, I mean, complete the whole session because we are not able to use the React library to basically use these APIs for us. We cannot do it in this particular time, but I mean, we'll definitely have a session, next session, where we'll be using this library only to we'll be using this library to create the front end as well, right? There we can basically see the whole these all of these scenario wherein we hit the API and things like that, right? So there you will be able to do it. But I think this is fine for now. So definitely, guys, we will keep another session. Just keep an eye on that as well. We will do that as well. So I hope everything is fine, guys. So this session is up. We have basically created the Node.js, the backend for authentication and authorization as well. So we have done that, and in the next session, we'll basically just try to use this API, or I mean, use some other APIs and understand the front end, the client side part as well, how to utilize these APIs and how to do the authentication authorization using a single page application as well. Okay, awesome, guys. I hope you have enjoyed it and you have found something useful out of it. And I will definitely see you in the next session, guys. Okay. So, guys, keep on improving. I mean, keep on learning and keep on doing these sessions, and we will catch up in the next session definitely. And either this or we'll use some other API, right? Okay, guys. So goodbye. Take care and stay home and stay safe. And I will see you in the next session.